up, Internet? If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And if O.J. Simpson was black, this shit wouldn't have happened. My name is Shahir Dowd, and welcome to
the only podcast about movies. Holy.
Coming out the gate swinging.
Coming out. Specifically the film, O.J. Made in America.
I'm going to put an asterisk next to the word film, and we're going to talk about that in some detail, I think.
Oh, I think we will. But we're not going to talk about it alone, Shahir.
Well, no, we're not. I like to talk with you alone, but...
That's terrifying sounding.
But this time around, I wanted to have someone in the room who had... A, some legal expertise, B, also an interest in film. And that's
murder experience.
And also a certified murderer.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing to come by. Like
it's a triple threat that you just don't see a lot.
Yeah, a lawyer who's committed a crime who also has written a screenplay.
Yeah, maybe about said crime.
But having reached out to a few people, they all converged on this one person who's sitting in the room right now, who's already won the guess game by bringing us treats. Melissa London Helfer is a former lawyer. Is that correct?
Yes, I no longer lawyer.
No longer lawyering.
Retired.
Okay. So if I have questions that I need to ask you about my property
how many years
details.
clean? How many years clean have you been?
I mean, it's a decade.
Oh, man.
Every day is a struggle.
Yeah.
And also turned screenwriter, recently successfully sold screenwriter, having sold two spec scripts and working on an adaptation.
There's stuff you don't even know about.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've sold 3 specs, but a bunch of stuff. Good stuff.
A bunch of good stuff.
Wait, do we not know about the murder? Were we not supposed to talk about the murder?
The murder one's out.
Oh.
No, there's stuff you know about, but it's like a little outdated.
Gotcha.
So for those who don't know about it, there's a script called Unfit, which you've been working on. Can you tell us a little bit about Unfit?
Sure. So Unfit is a comedy. No, it's not a comedy at all. It's a serious historical drama about the case of Buck v. Bell that happened in 1927, basically the culmination of the U.S. eugenics movement.
Okay.
And it's a seriously tragic cautionary tale.
And this is going to be starring Dakota Johnson.
Dakota Johnson.
Yep. So that makes perfect sense to me.
Totally. Yeah. To be honest,
fair, I'm sure she's wonderful.
She's a great actress and also was very into the story even before this script came about.
To be honest with you, I saw 50 Shades of Grey recently, and I kind of liked it.
Yeah, I know that's up your up your kind of like wannabe kink alley, but not quite there.
You know what it was about 50 Shades, and I know we're going down a little sidetrack here, but I think that I liked that there was a film that was trying to be a franchise about a mature topic.
Yeah,
but it does not treat it maturely at all.
How does it? I mean,
it's Twilight fan fiction.
Well, no, that's
it's
the
Twilight fan fiction. It's very profitable Twilight fan fiction. It's Twilight fan fiction.
The book was Twilight fan fiction.
I think the film...
But they hired an incredible screenwriter to...
How different... Now, admittedly, I'm making judgment calls on a film I have not seen.
Okay, let's just back this train up a second.
I can recommend another Dakota film that's fantastic.
Which is that?
Called A Bigger Splash.
Oh yeah.
Italian film. Luca...
Yes, she just worked with him again on something called Suspiria, which is a remake for Amazon.
Yeah.
Side note, I will also never judge an actor or an actress for working on a piece that's sort of that I would put into the category of 50 Shades. Yeah. I think it's a move everyone should do. You got to do it.
Again.
It's a wonderful career move, so that's never a problem. It's just from a viewership standpoint.
I will also say, not giving any assessment of the movie,
movie,
positive or negative. No, 50 Shades. We should have a whole other hour on 50 Shades, which would mean you'd have to watch it.
No,
she was great in it. I thought. I really thought.
I heard she was good, and the dude was.
No, here's the thing. Yeah. I think everyone walked into that movie and apparently it was laughable. I didn't find it laughable. I thought it was like it wasn't a great. I think this is an amazing movie, but I thought it was like it set out to do what it was going to do, and it did it. And I was kind of like, okay, cool, I'm with you.
Well, by everything I've learned about her, she's a really, really smart young woman and super interested in this.
That's great.
Historical topic. So very psyched that she's signed on to do it.
Yeah. So that's very exciting for you to obviously. And and again, I think both of your scripts, Unfit and Undone, which could be our nicknames in this room, I guess.
Yes.
Ooh. Which one am I? Oh, I'll think about that.
I'm definitely Unfit.
I only write one scripts.
I'm Undone. No, that's 100%.
Is also both these films have some legal element to it because obviously because of your background.
Yes.
But that's an area that you're interested in. And it's, I think an area why we wanted to have you on the show as well to discuss this particular film. But do you
film quotes?
Oh yeah.
But do you
asterisk?
Do you kind of like stay within that? You know, like do you want to stay within the? Do you find the world of like the way the legal world intersects with the real world?
It's a good question. And I actually am just now working on a book adaptation about a sadistic male lawyer.
There you go.
Who is a
so we've got the trifecta
lawyer
going
on domestic violence cases, and then he on the side is a sadist.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that the reason I went to law school in the first place is I've always found justice to be something that really attracted me. I'm like, I told you guys I was, doing work for the WJ. Like, I'm one of those people who likes to,
get
fight
involved.
for justice.
Full justice.
Yeah. And law also involves a lot of storytelling. So, so it's not crazy that I end up telling stories that have sort of a legal or justice kind of bent to them, because I was always interested in it.
And if you even want to jump to the other side of that spectrum, you could, if you wanted, while still being in that wheelhouse, write the next Judge Dredd movie.
I totally could.
Yeah.
I totally could.
If you want to make that
Keith Urban back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Into superhero movies. Actually, fun. I was just remembering as well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a lawyer because of this one movie called From the Hip, which was about this lawyer who gets like promoted into this legal. Remember with Judd Nelson? It's like a tacky.
From the Hip.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a tacky
It's like
movie.
super 80s.
Very, very 80s. But then like at some point,
That strikes me as like over the top.
it's pretty close to.
All right.
Yeah. But at some point I made the shift because I realized what I was actually in love with was the movie, not necessarily the actual legal process. I did like, I have a background in commercial law, but very slight, like it was part of my degree and I didn't follow through with it.
What did you do? So you've listened to a couple of the episodes.
Yeah.
And literally every time she adds another thing like, I was raised on a houseboat in Spain. And I'm like, okay, how old are you, vampire?
Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you, but not that much older.
Just 219.
Lived many lives.
So the reason we're all here in the room today is a film that I've been wanting to talk about ever since I watched it. It's on Hulu, available for free streaming right now.
You can't talk about it yet because you didn't do housekeeping.
Oh, because I didn't do housekeeping.
Yeah.
See, this is the thing.
You're so excited. I know. Calm down. Just collect your thoughts.
I learned how to do things, but I didn't learn how to do the basics, like clean up after myself.
Exactly.
My
Good
mom has been
transition.
complaining about this all the way. But if my mom wanted to write us in, she could write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com, or she could hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. Go on our website and write me an angry note about how I didn't clean my bedroom when I was a teenager at www.onlymoviepodcast.com.
Another thing he did in his life. He's a messy teenager.
He was, of course. Well, or what he didn't do. Also, you can see us on, you can't really see us. You can hear us on iTunes. Please, if you like what you hear, leave us some stars. We like stars. They mean we're doing a good job. Yes. Okay. Now, Shahir, you've eaten your vegetables.
Okay. We've eaten. Well, I think at this point, we're about to make you eat your vegetables because this is a movie.
I already ate my You made me watch 7 hours and 47 minutes of content.
Melissa, I got to tell you.
Yes,
I told Matt, hey, we're going to do this movie about 2 months ago.
Movie quotes. Asterisk.
And it it literally has taken him this long to watch it. And every time I would check in on him, he'd be like, yeah, I'm doing it. And the funny thing was when I signed you up to do it, like 2 days later, you said, yeah, I've seen it. I've watched it all in a couple of days. Dude. And Matt still was like, it took him another couple of weeks to actually get through this.
But you booking her did also make me finish it faster.
Sure. But I guess the point was that I knew this was a struggle for you, Matt. This was an endurance test for you.
Well, it's not, and again, I'll say straight up right now, it's not that I didn't enjoy it by any means of the imagination. It's just I'm in a lot of media debt.
Right.
And I have a lot of different media things pulling at my media time.
I feel though that like whenever I come over, you're like, I'm going to watch, you say things like, I'm going to watch Doctor Strange. And I'll be there like, have you watched the OJ doc yet? And you'll be like, I'm going to watch Doctor Strange first.
Which I haven't watched Doctor Strange yet. I bought Doctor Strange. I haven't watched it. And I get in this thing where I have Blu-rays that I buy and then I don't watch.
Here's what's crazy. I watched the OJ thing in 2 days. And since I talked to you, I've watched Doctor Strange.
Oh, there you go. I haven't watched Doctor Strange
Watch
yet.
your back, Matt.
You see what I'm saying here? But this was so for anyone listening in, tell us what the OJ doc is about as if we didn't know.
What do you mean? What
is the IMDb synopsis for the OJ doc?
I can do that. Yeah. Here we go. It is the defining cultural tale of modern America, a saga of race, celebrity, media, violence, and the criminal justice system. And 2 decades after its unforgettable climax, it continues to fascinate, polarize, and develop new chapters.
Is there a subject to that it in there? Like, did they actually say what it is?
No, in fact, this is more of a statement on the case itself, which is again a bigger problem I have with the film asterisk overall, rather than what the film does.
Okay,
asterisk. Yeah. So that's that. I mean, everyone, look, if you live in America or you lived in America during this time, there's no way you didn't glean even a portion of this thing. Now, maybe you didn't catch it all, and maybe this offered some new tidbits in there, but everyone knows about the O.J. Simpson trial in one way or another.
Why does everyone know about it? Now, so to come to your point about that, I lived in New Zealand when the O.J. Simpson trial was happening, and funny story was that the morning of the verdict, I stayed home and I watched TV to see what was happening, and I was late for school. So I arrived at school late, and when you arrive at school, you had to sign a slip to say why you were late, and I scribbled down O.J. Simpson.
Wow.
And my best friend Matt Clymer, who turned up after me, who was late because he's just late, wrote Bart Simpson. And he got detention.
See more butts.
And he got detention and I didn't because I don't know why.
I know why. It's very clear why. You were watching a cultural touch point and he was being a doofus.
And here's the thing. Why was the O.J. Simpson trial a cultural touch point for even people in New Zealand? I guess that's a question to you Americans in the room.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, after you.
Well, I was going to say one of the things that I picked up from this doc that I was younger when this all happened, and I don't know that I knew at the time why it was such a huge case, but OJ was a huge star.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I had never watched footage of him playing football, and there's footage of his most famous
the Heisman Trophy run.
It's truly incredible. It reminded me, I once saw Michael Jordan play for the Bulls. And I said to my husband, for real, yes.
Yeah.
And it's it was magical like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's someone who floats and has a supernatural gift.
They have an ability to do something with their body that makes them superhuman in some way.
Yes. And I think that was part of it. And then I also didn't know that he had created this whole, I knew he was a Naked Gun, but I didn't know he was a bona fide star.
Yeah. Right.
And I think on my end of it, you know, as much as I love superheroes, I am not a sports guy.
Yeah.
And so when this happened, I just knew he was a famous football player. And I didn't he was literally before, you know, you start learning stuff about the case and everything, I was just famous football player accused of murdering his wife and another person. I was like, okay, that, and even when I was younger, I was like, yeah, that's a thing. So it never, until it built up around itself, I didn't understand really what the fuss was about as far as and there was a fuss.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a real tie with it until really, I think maybe right after the Bronco.
Okay. Well, that's the first point.
The low-speed chase of the Bronco they cut into television to show it.
Yeah.
Didn't they cut into a major event at some point, didn't they?
The president speaking or something.
Yeah,
that was in the doc.
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't have been watching.
Yeah.
I was probably watching Melrose Place at whatever year it was.
Yep.
But whatever it was, they cut into it. And I really hadn't been familiar with OJ. I just knew he was this famous sports figure. So I wasn't aware of why it was it's a big deal because it's a murder, but and I guess a low speed chase. It was just the facts were so bizarre that I think people found that interesting too. And then the media clung onto this whole race thing, which
I think also
it was also the first time too that they were allowed into a courtroom of a major thing, right, with cameras and nonsense.
It was, but also you know the entire process seemed to have been televised. I think this was the nexus point between news becoming a commercial enterprise where they had to capture ratings versus just an informational thing. Ugh. So the idea that they would just, you know, this was the point at which if it bleeds, it leads kind of became a thing, I guess, you know, you know, you could cut to the actual Bronco, you know, going down the freeway, and you could cut back to it. It was what's happening in the OJ trial, and as it went on for a couple of years, it was what's happening in the OJ trial now. So it was in a way, this might be the beginnings of reality TV, or at least some point the inception of what our idea of reality TV eventually became.
Well, it's how they learned that they could I mean, this story is compelling due to all the reasons this 7 and some change hour doc exists, but I think they also learned that you can say the same shit over and over and over again, and as long as you kind of promise something might be coming up, people will still watch it.
Right.
And that sucks.
I don't know. I mean,
what do you mean you don't? That's awful.
For example, I'm a big fan of true crime stories, and I'm a big fan of, for example, Serial and the Jinx. And the great structural thing that Serial did was that it would go over material over and over again in each episode, and then tease just a little bit something new.
Serial did it up until the end, and then it didn't. But Serial did it and actually like was educating you on important things, not saying the same shit and don't worry, we have something else coming up for no reason.
You're
like
critiquing
news
news,
does.
right?
Yes, I'm critiquing news.
Serial was different because it was ex post. It was after the thing had happened.
Yeah.
So they could pick out the interesting facts and tell
And
it
have
in
some
a different way.
post-analysis as
This
well.
was at the time, it's like they're in the Bronco. Now we're hearing he has a gun to his head.
Yeah.
Now we're hearing so-and-so's, passing in a car. So it's like, it was the stuff that was happening was bona fide interesting. A guy had a gun to his, that stuff.
Famous dude driving in a low speed chase with a gun.
But like you could just tell us that and then cut back to Melrose Place and like tell me when something happens.
Right.
But there were people who were really glued to it and wanted to see what happened. And I guess maybe it was the first time and they were getting great ratings and making money. So
So Matt, 7.5 hours in, how
47 minutes.
How did you endure?
I mean, fine. I had to watch it in a bunch of pieces. I first thought sort of thing for it would be the first episode was the hardest for me to get through because again, I'm not sports guy. As you can tell by our lovely studio. So watching like highlights and sort of like it was so interesting because the first 3 hours of this film is based on like kind of leading up to the murders and it would anytime it cut to like how awesome at sports he was, which was about half the time of that 3 hours, I was like, I don't care.
I felt exactly the opposite.
Really?
I'm totally not a sports person. I don't care. I mean, I really don't care.
Yeah.
Even now, I don't know what team, if I thought he was in Buffalo.
Buffalo,
yeah,
right.
yeah. Okay. But I mean, only because I like had 7 hours of hearing about it.
Yeah.
Right.
But I thought the level he played at when they actually showed that thing, I was like, oh my God, no, I get it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it
didn't show a lot of sports,
but it was just a lot of sort of his career and that sort of thing. And what I found it more interesting in that 3 hours was the way they kept cutting back and forth, and I felt they did it more aptly as that 3 hour period went on to the racial divide and the racial issues that were going on at the same time as he was coming up, like the two tandem stories,
right?
Which eventually obviously clashes together, and then we get the whole kerfuffle. So. The first episode was the hardest, and then this is and again I know there's a ton of interesting things to talk about with the case, but if we're talking about this as a piece of media that we're going to ingest and a film, an asterisk, that's the other thing. Was it released as a film?
It was.
Okay, because it
won Best Documentary at the Oscars, which and since then. The rules have changed to not allow a film like this.
Right. And I think that's entirely correct move because if you want to classify this as a film, and for me, I don't know the full definition, even though we are the only podcast about movies.
We're not the only podcast about films.
Yes, loophole.
Oh.
He just lawyered.
Asterisk.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's privileged.
Yeah. So just the fact that this won that and was in that category and everything, like I think as a film, it does fail in that definition because it is too damn long. Shahir, back in the day I was an editor and you've edited obviously. I saw a compelling way to tell this in 3 hours.
Right.
Now, but to jump that, true crime fans, they want it long. They want the long form, and I totally get that because there's that sick fascination, and I have it too. But just of a murder story and like every little detail, and then everyone gets to play armchair detective, and like it's this weird sort of like cultural just look into the darkness of the human soul or lack thereof. So I get that from the other side of it. But if we're talking film, I think it fails. If we're talking series that I can watch in tiny chunks throughout, and which I would not consider one film, then I think it's far more successful.
I think you're talking about the definition of what it is. What
but the fact that it won an award for it also bothers me. And again,
an Oscar.
Yeah. So I guess
what I'm asking you though is, did you think it was effective?
Yes, but as a asterisk. But it could have been just as effective shorter.
Okay.
I think it could have been shorter too.
Yeah. It felt indulgent.
I mean, I think it could have been 4 hours. Like that's still a lot of time.
It shouldn't have ever been longer than the longest extended cut of Lord of the Rings.
But you know what else? We were trying to watch it. I, who was doing my homework correctly, was trying to watch it quickly. You were just trying to watch it.
That was dilly-dallying.
Yeah.
But I don't know how ESPN released it on TV, but was it like the FX show where it was like once a week for 7 weeks.
So I've listened to some interviews with Ezra Edelman, and I think they initially were planning to release 50-minute chunks, and then at some point they realized that the narrative structure of this fit into time periods. And they said, well, rather than release it as episodic chunks, we're going to fit it as time periods. Then they also screened it at film festivals with intermissions as a 7-hour thing.
Wow.
And people turned up for that, and people stayed and watched the entire thing.
Sure, but people will turn up for 7 hours. There are the people that will just go watch like a 9-hour film.
Right. But so you're saying that people will do that despite the film?
I'm saying it's possible for, kind of. I'm not saying
that people just don't have stuff to do with their Saturday.
Right. Exactly. And some people like really like it. I mean, everyone has a different cup of tea, but I'm just saying, I'm just saying just because a select few at a couple screenings,
but it wasn't a select few. It played at many film festivals, and it went on to win an Oscar for Best Documentary Feature.
By select few, I mean, if you take the number of people that saw those screenings versus the number of people that see an average films that's at this average length screenings, it is a select few.
Sure.
It's probably true.
Yeah.
Based on your own metric. Okay.
Well, based on reality.
No, but the definition of the film thing is interesting because it's like, is it fair? Is it like apples to apples? So after they changed the rule, Sheila Nevins, who I think is the head of HBO, came out and said like, well, I'm glad they changed the rule because like people might have wanted to vote for Making a Murderer, which was also that many. They didn't release it in a theater because like they didn't think of it as a movie.
Yeah.
But It did seem a little unfair. It's like maybe 1.5 hours of it should have competed against the other documentaries, because if you have 7 hours, you can make it really, really multidimensional.
There are precedents for that. The Holocaust documentary show is 7.5 hours long as a single film, and I don't believe that won the Oscar, or maybe it did. I can't.
But it also should have to do with how it's released. That's really I know that's not. Like
but that's why they did it in theaters. I'm sure that's why.
Yeah, and that's why the loophole that they got right. Wow, a loophole about a thing that has a lot of loopholes.
Yeah. And asterisks.
Yeah, and asterisks and quotation, air quotes, tons of air quotes.
Beast of No Nation they did that with too.
They released it online because it was an online release film, but they released it in theaters.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that still fit the general mold other than a release schedule. Yeah.
I guess to me this asks the question is, what is the length of a piece of string really? You know, like what defines the length of a movie? And you can make a 7 hour and 47-minute film, and still I think it should be fine. But it's A, how you release it, and B, just because it's 7 hours and 47 minutes doesn't mean. And this was quality. I'm not shitting on the quality of this, but like that it also should have to do with quality, and by that I mean wait, you said it doesn't have to do with quality,
what I'm trying to say is it could have been stronger had it been shorter, and I'm surprised more people didn't realize that. Whereas if there's and I haven't seen it yet, but a film that has to be 7 hours and 47 minutes to be told and perfect and beautiful, sure, then that should win if it's released as a film and only as a film. Where this, I do feel like it's maybe one of its only true shortcomings, in my opinion, is that it was too damn long. Yeah.
So for me, I loved every second of this, and I wouldn't cut a frame of this film.
How did you watch this? You have a kid.
And I watched it twice.
How did you watch this twice?
Dude, I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
But you watched it once.
Oh, you watched it twice?
I watched it twice. I watched it.
Wow.
But
that's impressive.
I ate up every minute of this, and
impressive.
I am impressive.
It's weird.
It's weird and weirdly impressive.
We're gonna watch it after this podcast.
I would watch it again too. I would totally watch this again. I loved every frame of this, and what I loved about it is it's in one part about O.J. Simpson the man, another part about O.J. Simpson the trial, and another part it's about us, and it's about the phenomenon. What I love about this, and the reason why I think the 7.5 hours is important, is this film goes out of its way to not sensationalize the trial, but give you the exact historical context for which this trial exists and for which the results of which can occur. And I think the thing that was interesting for me is like growing up in New Zealand, when I saw the Bronco, down the freeway, I thought that was visually interesting. I thought that was an interesting moment, and I was curious about the fact that everyone was talking about this, and this is something that everyone gathers around. We see that like even this, as we're recording it this week, there are 2 like cultural phenomenons that happen that everyone's kind of like gravitating around. That's the Pepsi commercial with Kendall Jenner, and this is the story of United Airlines where the man got dragged off the plane. And there are always these moments that seem to capture the public's imagination. What's interesting about this documentary is it goes out of its way to fully give you almost all the detail, all the cultural, historical, political, social relevance to tell you why that moment was important and why that moment mattered. Because like you could argue that why does anyone care about a guy, a sports celebrity murdering his wife? Mm-hmm. And the thing that this film goes out of its way to tell you, to point out that I think is the reason why I think it's masterfully done, is that it's not just about this guy murdering his wife. It's about the history of Los Angeles. It's about the history of the police culture in Los Angeles. It's about the history of African Americans in Los Angeles. It's about the way in which the American courtroom system works and the way in which the American legal system
the way
works.
It didn't work.
Right. Well, that's an interesting question, and I think that's really worth discussing, because what this film does for me, that the eye-opening thing that it did for me that made me so invested in this is that, as I said, I have some background in law. I have an interest in the way the machinations of the legal system works. One thing that this film did for me that I had never really thought about was the way in which a trial can be a barometer of a social movement. And so what I mean by that is the end result of this trial, where of the criminal case where O.J. Simpson is acquitted. Spoiler alert for that.
Well, this has been the only podcast about O.J. Made in America.
The thing that I thought was so fascinating about that is that the film gave me all the historical context to understand why that was the case and why it didn't necessarily have to do with OJ, with the evidence itself. In fact, if you watch this, and I'm sure, Melissa, you'll have some comments about this, it almost had nothing to do with the evidence itself.
Yeah.
No,
but the theory that I walked out was, oh, wow, a trial and justice isn't actually an objective scale, the sword and scale. It's actually a pendulum. And it moves from left to right depending on the barometer of the social presence. And in the case of this film, I think the argument that this film is really making is the pendulum is swinging from the Rodney King trial to O.J. Simpson, and that's
you're talking about human justice, not ultimate justice, or governmental, like societal, like the United States' justice versus the actual concept of justice.
Well,
because the concept of justice is not a pendulum, but the way we interpret justice and the way justice is done obviously is a pendulum.
But that it gets into that question of, is there objective justice in the world?
Oh yeah, there is.
Oh, you think
maybe not in the world, but the concept.
Okay, so wait, let me interject.
As a lawyer,
interesting anecdote that I think plays into this. So when the OJ verdict came down, I was in law school, and I was in, I believe, a Civ Pro lecture when they stopped class to announce the verdict.
Okay.
And actually what happened was they wheeled in a TV, and so we saw some famous person say the verdict.
Right.
And what happened, it's like really something that seared itself in my brain, is that this is so, like, I'm just reporting the news. This is what happened.
Yeah.
All of the white people in the room went, oh my God.
How did this happen?
And all of the people of color cheered.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart because, oh my God, like I'm tearing up.
Yeah.
It really did, though, because I think everyone in the room believed he killed his wife.
Yeah.
And the fact that that there could be such a gulf in how you would feel about the fact that someone who killed their wife got away with it. I wasn't like angry at the people who were happy. I was upset that I didn't get it.
Right. And yeah, that was the interesting thing about watching this film was that I think, from New Zealand, I was watching and going, well, he clearly killed his wife
in a disgusting, by the way, one of the things that this movie Asterisk does is it shows the footage of I had not seen, maybe I didn't watch it because I had not seen her body.
Right.
It was brutal.
Yeah. It was brutal. But what it does, again, the film paints a clear line, and it does it across that 7.5 hour period between the beating of Rodney King,
yes,
and the acquittal of O.J. Simpson.
The LA cops in general, the whole everything that was going on there.
Because eventually the trial itself kind of turned from the murder trial of O.J. Simpson to kind of was it Furman?
Yeah,
Mark
Furman.
An
trial
indictment
on him
of the cops
and the cops in general.
Which
the
thing that was interesting for me is that yes, that's outrageous when you think about like what is the objective of this particular trial, which is to determine the guilt or innocence of this one man. But the thing that I think that is so powerful about this documentary is that it made me understand that acquittal in the context of the history of Los Angeles, in the context of the history of the LA police, and between that line between Rodney King and that.
I agree, it did that. And
sure,
that's a very interesting
It 100% did that. I just think it could have been 4 hours, 3.5 hours. I don't know.
Okay. I
know you disagree, but yeah.
Well, I disagree. I disagree because
it did win an Oscar.
It did win an Oscar.
In a category where it kind of broke the rules.
Maybe. Well, at the time,
it didn't break any rules.
Yeah,
didn't break a single rule. They created a new rule to say that
they fixed the rules. It didn't break a rule. You're right. They fixed the rules to make it better.
Much like the OJ case itself, it took advantage of the system that was in place.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of the case, actually, Shahir, you had another question.
Well, I was curious to Melissa. You were a trial lawyer, for a corporate trial lawyer. Is that correct? So you've obviously had the training of someone who's been in a courtroom to deal with jury selection, to deal with presenting evidence.
Yeah.
If you were teaching trial law right now and you were going to bring up the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yep.
How would it be instructional for you? How would it deviate from the norms?
Yeah.
What was interesting about this case?
And I learned something in the movie. Again, I don't want to spoil it.
No, you can
7 hours of juicy information.
But
I learned something new that I didn't know, and that was that one of the jurors was a former member of the Black Panthers.
Right.
Yep.
Would that disqualify you from being in a jury? No, I'm certain that
disqualify a person from being on a jury.
But I'm
if
sure
I had a challenge.
Yeah.
If I had, so in every trial, you have a certain number of challenges for cause and certain that are peremptory, which means, and I don't know exactly in California at that time, what the rules were for how many you have.
Sure.
But it means you can knock off 5 people just because you don't like the cut of their jib.
Yeah.
And you're
Good
welcome.
turn of phrase.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then you can knock off a certain number because you have a reason. Like, for example, they have a sister who was a victim of domestic violence.
Yeah.
So to me, having been a member of the Black Panthers in a case where, and again, it goes to, we didn't know they were going to bring up race.
Yeah.
But one of the things they teach you in law school is when you're asking potential jurors to be on your jury, think of all of the questions that might reveal something about them. So like, for example, what magazines do you read? I mean, nowadays that's not a question because nobody gets magazines, but back then, what magazines do you read? And if the guy said like Black Power Monthly, Marsha Clark would have been like, I don't think he's our guy. I'm going to use one of my challenges.
Do you think this is, so one of the things that came up in the film was this a case of the OJ trial team, the dream team, so to speak, winning the case, or Marsha Clark's defense team losing the case, and selecting someone, allowing someone like that to be on the jury pool? Is that an example of a failure of Marsha Clark's team?
Here's the thing. I have so much respect for the people on that team, and my heart breaks for them because I feel like it's one of those things. I mean, you could see, and Darden hasn't participated in any of these things, and it just seems like it broke him.
Oh, I mean, Darden.
So I hate to say anything negative, but for sure, OJ had brilliant people working for him, and he paid,
top dollar.
Top dollar.
You know, the interesting thing is the first thing I did was like, how much did that legal defense team cost?
They say it at some point.
$5 million.
The whole time?
Which to me seems like bargain basement for what he got.
It is, although.
Well, you are made of money.
I am made of money.
That's true. You're like, before 10 a.m. I've spent that.
Yeah.
But I think.
For someone like OJ, that seems.
Right now, people would do a case like that for free because of the press you get.
Right.
I mean, Johnny Cochran, after that, everybody in America knew exactly who he was and thought he was brilliant. So it was a combination, like a perfect storm of wins and losses. I actually think in some ways the case was lost by going in the venue they went. They decided
to do it downtown.
They decided to go in downtown. That's not a jury of OJ's peers. Let's be honest.
See, the interesting thing that I think the film does is compare and contrast that with the fact that the Rodney King trial went to Simi Valley, which is not a place, which was a place where a jury pool was predominantly made of people who know police officers. So it was that's the kind of thing that I thought was really interesting about the film, which is that, and the reason that they did that, the reason that the district attorney did that, was that he didn't want to appear to be biasing the jury pool.
Yes.
And so, he
was too focused on how it appeared, and it ended up making that case in Brentwood, a Brentwood jury would not have found him guilty. Would have found him guilty.
Yeah.
Would have found him guilty. No question.
Yeah. And so I guess this brings back my point about why I think this is an effective documentary is that like an hour earlier, they talk about the Rodney King trial and about the fact that that they took it to Simi Valley instead of downtown LA where it actually happened. And you had a a protester who decided to go down to Simi Valley, and she talks about how, when I asked people about where the trial was going on, people gave me funny looks, and it made you think about, well, that's really a factor in the judicial, and it clearly, see, the thing is that we're kind of talking about the miscarriage of justice that happened around OJ's acquittal, but and what the film is really trying us to get to think about is the miscarriage of justice that continues to happen on the opposite side, where a policeman or policewoman who have been accused of committing crimes are often found not guilty.
Yes.
And we see that even today. And why I think this documentary is so good is that it doesn't just do that in an abstract way. It doesn't just say, Rodney King got off, and that's why the jury pool there. It actually goes through and points out the detail. And I think I would presume that for any legal student, this would be, on the syllabus as
I think so. And I think that the documentary did a great job with that, but I also think the story really has a lot of levels to it. Like, it's like this crazy Shakespearean tragedy. And you get to, just when you feel a certain way, you've seen, what you were asking, Matt, about what is justice. I mean, if you want to get to the very basic, was this justice for the victims? No, this was not. Who are we getting justice for? Yeah. And so the documentary brings out, yes, we're getting justice for society, maybe, or some people in society. And is that a different question than what justice for the victims is? And then they had this whole thing on the Goldman family.
The Goldman family post the trial.
They are fucking victims.
Yeah.
And so unfair.
And they do them, and then again, it does that kind of amazing line that they take a long time to, I would say this film is almost novelistic. It doesn't feel like it feels like as detailed as a novel would be about the story. And the line that they point between the 33 years that or the 33 million that he owed Ron Goldman.
I had no idea.
And then the 33 years that OJ was convicted for what was ostensibly a petty crime.
Yes. And he had no record, I don't think. Really.
And he had no record of that at that time.
Other than that pesky murder.
So this is
that pesky murder.
No, but this is that thing where it kind of feels like the justice system is more of a pendulum. It's swung.
No, you're totally right.
It swung away from OJ when it came to Nicole Brown, but it swung completely into him when he robbed some what was it?
Some sports memorabilia.
Sports memorabilia dealers. Was there anything else? You mentioned Darden before as well, and the interesting thing that happened.
He's the glove guy, right? I'm sorry.
Yes,
he's the guy who's
he's the guy that, in my opinion, based on this, lost the case because he was trying to be a little bit of a hotshot.
I actually don't think it was him. I really don't think it was him who lost the case.
The documentary paints him as the one that really wanted to do this glove thing.
I think the glove thing is really important as to why OJ was acquitted, but I also think the reason why OJ was
then winning the case and the other guy losing the case.
I was going to say, I think this really comes down to Mark Furman. I think it really, and the failure of the defense team was to properly vet Mark Furman.
That was a huge mistake.
Yeah, it was a huge mistake to put Mark Furman on the trial, on the stand.
Sure. I honestly, and again, I'm going to be an armchair lawyer right now, especially since we have a real one in the room. Yeah. That I feel like is recoverable if you played your cards right. And the nail in the coffin, making it like you cannot come back for this, because he basically this was a Hail Mary for a football term. That's weird I used one, but this is all or nothing. We're going in, and the way it painted, again, these are all people 20 years later or whatever, hindsight being what it is. They're all saying none of us wanted you to do this. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do this. They're saying that now. Who knows if in the room they were yeah, we do this. But even me, I don't even remember back in the day. I was well, wait, how old is this glove? Was it outside? Is stuff dried? Wait, he's putting it on with gloves, with latex gloves? Yeah. There's all these things where I'm
wait, so let me teach you guys a little something about law. And it was actually misquoted or misstated in the documentary by Jeffrey Toobin, who's considered one of the world experts on this case. He wrote the book. And he did go to law school. I know someone who went to law school with him. He's a very smart guy, but it's what he learned.
For the New York Times as well, right?
I've seen him on CNN. I'm sure he is. Yeah. I mean, he's a super smart journalist and legal expert and commentator. And I believe he went to Harvard Law School. I went to Chicago Law School. They taught it a little differently in Chicago. He says, Chicago style. Yeah. He says in the documentary that they failed a very basic thing you learn in law school, which is don't ask a question if you don't know the answer. And that's not actually correct, because here's the truth. You never know the answer. People lie. They change things on the fly. The real tenet is don't ask a question to which you can't handle any answer.
Right. I think what he's saying is a kind of theoretical approach to if you're a defense lawyer, right? Which is don't ask a question where the possibility is that you would get an answer you're not happy with.
Right, but what I'm saying is there's always that possibility. Right, so you can't ask it unless the worst thing they say is not going to ruin your case.
And due to the fact that all the other shit with Furman was going on and just damaging them and damaging them and damaging them, to do this and not to know for a fact that if that didn't fit, that would damage them beyond repair, and just do it anyway. Yeah. Like, that's insane.
But the reason why I think this documentary is brilliant is that I completely understood the rationalization for Darden doing it.
Oh, I 100% did not.
Having been humiliated in front of the court by who's the
was it
Johnny Cochran?
Was it Cochran?
By Johnny Cochran, because Darden is a young lawyer in this case, and he is a first time attorney, and he's really being brought on because of the color of his skin.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so
but he played into their hand, no pun intended.
Of course, but I understand why he did it. I understand completely why he did it. He was foolish to do it, but he's a young attorney. He wants to stake his claim. He's being brought in really only, as far as the documentary sets out, like they do say he's a smart attorney, he's part of the office, but really what they wanted to do was have someone black on the other side.
Well, here's the other thing. It was totally his glove. Yeah. And at one point, it totally did fit him. Yeah. If it wasn't Bizarro World, it totally would have worked.
It also, they had a receipt for him purchasing.
But what I'm saying is, that's rare. The nail in the coffin. That is the no coming back from thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that, and it's the whole legal team, it can't just be one person's fault. The fact that he was allowed to do that, the fact that he thought it was a good idea, the fact that he got goaded into thinking, well, you know what, it's all or nothing now. Like, that to me is what lost the case.
All of those things in front of a Brentwood jury, and jury would still, and OJ would still be in.
But they need to. But they also. But they also need to know what jury they're in front of. Like that's the thing. You can't. All of these factors do have to play in, and if you misstep, that is a misstep.
But here's the thing: if you were teaching a legal class based on this, would one of the conversations, and I guess to your point about the Black Panther trial, the jury member, speaks to that. How important is context to a legal case? Like, how important is it?
It really shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
It should be that people saw a dead woman and a dead guy and wanted to put the person who killed them behind bars.
Right.
Unfortunately, what I think we learned from this case is that sometimes there are things that, there are deeper wounds than that.
And I just, this is why I think this is such a it opens up this entire line of conversation. And then, I think to your point to the glove, the thing that's really interesting about that is in the civil trial, which happens later when Goldman is in the room, they go over the shoe. And the thing is with the shoe is it's such a smoking gun piece of evidence. It's like not only did he own the shoe that he owned had blood on it. The prints from that shoe were found on the stand. He lies on the stand for saying that I don't own that pair of shoes, and then they cut to a photograph of him wearing those shoes. And they're a very specific size and brand. So my point is that while the glove became the piece de resistance of the trial as we know it, because Johnny Cochran uses it in his summation, it was probably also part of a number of things that immediately got forgotten because of Mark Furman.
So here's an interesting question. But Matt,
I was just going to say it again. Nothing you're saying is sort of just proving my point. It's like, there's a bunch of things that the prosecution was getting slammed on, and then they decided rather than to be smart about it or get their act together,
they didn't pivot.
They didn't pivot at all. They just kept fucking plowing forward.
Here's what was interesting, and again, that I learned from the document. It's funny, you're selling me. I'm like feeling it was even better. I enjoyed it. I really did. And I thought there were brilliant things about it. But you're right. I mean, the way they presented it does sort of emotionally manipulate you in a good way.
It gives you, again, what I love about this is context.
Yes,
this is giving me all the context I need to understand why this acquittal happened.
But so, they went in there and they said that we're not going to make race an issue.
Yeah. And which is foolish.
Well, it wasn't true. No. I mean, the defense said they were lying. Yeah. They said we're not going to make race an issue, and then they totally did.
Yeah.
But what I hadn't realized before watching the doc was all this business about OJ saying, I'm not black, I'm OJ.
Yeah.
So if I were the prosecution and I'm seeing them playing that, like, this is a black man, you're black people, you've been wronged, be your brother's here, and which worked, why didn't the prosecution go, let's, put up all these witnesses who has had OJ disavow being black in a way.
But that
verbally.
They
were scared of it. They were scared of race altogether.
Yeah. Of course they're scared of race altogether because of the Rodney King trial.
Right.
You see how much Johnny Cochran and his team and Robert Shapiro, to the point when for some reason Lancito decides that they're going to take the jury to OJ's house, which is,
oh my God, that was the craziest shit I've ever seen. They changed the artwork. Is that a spoiler? They changed the artwork in the house to make him seem more black. How is that okay?
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? But to me, that demonstrates, kind of the genius of Robert Shapiro and Johnny Cochran to understand why this case is so important and why they can manipulate race in a way. And I think what the film is really pointing to here is that OJ is a false pariah. He's a person that doesn't deserve to have the wheels of justice fall this way in his favor.
Right.
But it does. And it does because the wheels of justice have fallen so far in the opposite direction against people of color that it makes sense that it happened to him. Like even one of the jurors at the end of the film says, no, that guy is stupid as hell and he shouldn't, he just got away. I think the jury even says he might have gotten away with murder.
Yeah.
He should have lived life completely quietly and just slipped out of the limelight forever. But no, he had to fuck up and do it again.
That's the same juror, though, who said that, some women,
deserve to get beat. Yeah,
deserve to get beat, whatever. However she put it.
Yeah. So, and I mean, but that.
Again, I feel like, in jury questioning, it seems like you could have weeded her out.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're right, though. But yeah, why didn't she get weeded out? And why did the trial... I mean, to me, the thing is this is an important point in legal history. And it really points to a lot of things that are important about the legal system. But again, what I love about this film, what I just adore about this film.
Wait, did you like this movie though?
I 100%.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Is that it gets to a broader question, and it's in the title, Made in America.
Yes.
What is so unique about this story is the way in which it presents a portrait of America that we sometimes believe is post-racial.
Mm-hmm.
But is entirely not. Is so completely non-post-racial. Race is such an important factor in every discussion.
And you know what? Even taking race out of it, it's made in America in terms of the fame component. Exactly. They made OJ into this. It was hero worship, basically. Yeah, of course. And that's a very American, even maybe more now than it was then, a very American phenomenon. Yes, as I said, he threw the ball or caught it or whatever he was doing beautifully.
There was ball play somewhere.
There was something great with the ball. Running. He did a lot of good running.
Yeah,
I saw good running.
Yeah.
But I mean, really good.
Yeah.
But does that mean he should get away with murder in America?
Does it mean he should be a millionaire over, say, a doctor?
We've gone over this on this podcast a million times. It's how talented does someone have to be to forgive the fact that they are fucking awful? And by that I mean Chris Brown is obviously a person that's one.
Yeah.
And then all this shit about Michael Jackson that came out even after his death that then instantly got brushed under the rug because man, that music is good. So
it's interesting in this film they point to there's
Casey Affleck was just sort of another he's dealing with a bunch of stuff, but oh man, that movie was really great. So it's how talented do you have to be and for society to know that you are a shithead? That they're but you know what, man, that scene in that film really made me cry.
But even in this film, there's a point because they talk about athletes that were contemporaries of OJ that really embraced the fact that they were black athletes and they were black leaders.
Yes.
And they had to make a stand.
And he chose not to.
But one of the people they point to is Jim Brown.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And Jim Brown has a history of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And has a history of being like, like potentially raping women.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that, again, I didn't know that about, but, like I loved him in Mars Attacks. And, yeah. So I love that the film kind of like basically opens the Pandora's box of everything is open to discussion here. Even people in the film,
even Mars Attacks,
even that they don't talk about, like Jim Brown.
And again, this is the interesting part, and I know I'm going to keep going back to this. It's going to sound like a broken record. I think it does all these things. I think it does a great job at doing everything you've described, and especially the sort of like celebrity in America and that whole thing, and why are we so obsessed with it, and sort of that whole aspect of like what part of our society makes it okay to just sort of latch onto this shit. It was just too long.
I would have cut some.
For me,
really?
I loved it. Maybe not as much as you did.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I was incredibly impressed by.
Yeah.
I know a lot about this case.
Yeah.
I mean, I followed it contemporaneously. I've read about it since. I've read books about it. I watched the FX show, which I also thought was terrific and did
It's good.
a
It's
pretty
very
good job of what
I
you're
watched
talking
that as
about.
well. Yeah.
Also, I learned new stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff I already knew, I saw, in slow detail that I maybe didn't need to because they were putting it in this context. So yeah, I think I'd say 4 or 5 hours.
This is what I'm saying, Shu. You really don't think, and I respect you entirely as a filmmaker. I 100% do. So it shocks me that you think that this is the perfect length. You really believe that every stitch of this, because you said every frame in the beginning that you love so much and is so necessary to tell this story.
Let me give examples of
Wait, just say yes or no to that. You really believe that?
Yeah, I really do.
But I'm going to make our case.
I really
There's
do.
evidence. If we went back and watched it together, which I will not insist upon us doing, although it would be funny to watch Matt do that.
Let's not.
The agent who had been his agent for so long that they kept coming back to and asking questions, I feel like that guy answered the same question many, many times. And he was answering it in different contexts, but I think maybe one of those interviews could have been cut. Okay.
I don't. I really think.
I mean, I can't argue your opinion.
I wasn't bored.
Such a this. I mean, I think the conversation you guys are kind of trying to say is could Moby Dick be told in 100 pages?
It's a good question.
And I'm saying no, but the reason Moby Dick is because Moby Dick is that many pages, and I think the reason why OJ Made in America is because it's 7.5 hours long. And I feel
I don't know enough about Moby Dick. I've only read it once, so I can't really say, and it was forever ago, but I'm guessing you could cut down Moby Dick too.
But would it be Moby Dick?
Yeah, if you get the same, that's the thing with editing. If you get the same thing out of it, you're doing it better. Like that's the thing. You could find it.
There's nothing in here that I got more than once. More, and nothing in here that I got where I felt like the point was being labored. I felt like everything
I did. That's all I'm saying. I mean, and again, I'm not. This is the interesting part I think about reviewing documentaries is, and again, I think brought up, or this was a biopic, but you brought up the Barry review that we did.
Yeah.
Right.
When we were off the air, it's like, is this so good because it's something A, we're familiar with, B, is in the public zeitgeist, C, whatever. Like, could you do this? I think the difference sort of is from like Barry to this, for instance, is you throw murder in there and you're instantly given a pass to sort of like really dive deep. Now, let's say this isn't about OJ. Let's say this wasn't a touch point. Let's say this was just a random thing that like Serial picked up and was like, now we get to go into this murder trial that no one's heard of. Ooh, it's a new murder trial. Like, oh my God. Oh, and there was some sort of this, and oh my God, like there was a near decapitation. Oh, that's brutal. Like, just like that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. This is a question I'm sort of posing because I'm flip-flopping back and forth. Like, if this wasn't about O.J. Simpson, which how could you take it away from this, about this thing? Would you let it be 7 hours and 47 minutes long? And I don't know the answer to it because of the aspect of murder. Like, there's something, because obviously it's one of the biggest taboos in human society in general. That's not everywhere, but it's just something about the fact that murder is involved that we all swarm, and because it's the shit you're not supposed to talk about, and it's the shit you're not supposed to do.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think the Avengers Infinity War story?
Oh, I love that you brought it to Marvel before me. That is a win.
I'm just trying to bring it to your level here. Do you think that the Avengers Infinity War story could be done in one film?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
100%. It better be.
No. What I'm saying is no Captain America, no Iron Man, no Thor movies, just the Avengers Infinity Story. Do you think it could be done in that one film? Just in one film without any of the others? Because we're talking about essentially...
That's an interesting question. I know it's silence. I'm sorry. I'm actually thinking. I'm looking up and actually thinking.
I was going to say I don't think it's analogous, but I'm not like a super comic person. But the Avengers are a whole team. So we're doing a deep dive on one of them. So I think it's more analogous to just Iron Man.
Right. No, I guess my point is that
that's a good point.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been building up this one story for what, it was 15 movies now, or something like that. And what you're saying to me is the OJ film could have been 1 hour. And
I didn't say it could be 1 hour.
2 or 3 hours.
I was saying
whatever.
3 to 4, but yeah.
You're picking a number.
I'm saying it could have been edited down. So it's not analogous because, no, Infinity War couldn't be as good without knowing all the context, but also each one of the stories is not 7 hours to get me there. Like it's this whole thing of like, and again, it's all about editing. I don't want an Infinity War that's 7 hours long. I think they can make a better one that's 3. Now that's what editing is. It's giving you the same feeling for the shortest amount of time that you need to do.
Here's not to get too meta about it.
Oh shit.
But an actual trial, say a murder trial,
right?
When you're a juror and you're a part of it and you are the stakes are all on you. It's weeks and weeks of sitting through boring shit on top of brutal shit that's completely repetitive and redundant.
Of course.
So there may be some element here of value in you being the juror and making the sort of the verdict by the
juror
end.
says that in this film. She says, because they say, do you
teams?
That's okay.
She says, do you regret? The Ezra Edelman asked her, do you regret your decision? And she said, not one bit. And he said, why? And she says, 6 months. Or was it 6 months or a year?
9 months or something.
9 months.
It's a big, long investment, and you're being a proxy in a way.
This is the difference. And I hope I can flip you back. I might not be able to. Is it necessary to make the proper decision, which may or may not have been made at the end of this trial, for a juror to sit through 9 months of tedium? Yeah. Absolutely. Is it necessary to tell the story of that more of that sort of same tedium in elongated form? Yes, in some way, but not, in my opinion, as long as it was. That's all I'm saying. Is I know that we're trying to equate the experience of like actually, and then we get into film as medicine, and we get into like not everything should be enjoyable. We talked about last week, Colossal, or a couple weeks ago or whatever, about how that film, for me, I didn't particularly enjoy watching it, but it touched something in me that made me be like, that was good. Now, again, how can something be good and you don't like it? That's the whole sort of thing with this. I'm just saying, personally, if I'm going to, again, watch a documentary about murder, this was too long.
Have you watched The Jinx?
Parts of it.
Making a Murderer?
I did. I loved every single one of them.
Making a Murderer.
But here's the thing. Those are miniseries. And here's what I was going to get back to bring it back full circle to, is this a film?
Yeah.
And I don't know that you, during any one of those 1.5 hour chunks, felt specifically bored of this. Of
it was
OJ.
3.5 and 3 and some change, everyone.
They were that long?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you notice?
Pretty long.
I think they were 3 hour and 4, 3 hour and 4, and 140 something.
Dozing. I'm not saying that. So like for me, they were each 1.5 hours.
Yeah.
No.
No.
And I missed the rest of it.
Did he
get off? No, I don't know.
I missed the bloody stuff. No, but I know how it came out. Fortunately, I spoiled it for myself by living through it.
Yeah.
But I do, when you're watching Serial, for example, if I binge Serial and listen to it all at once, the original one, I haven't watched it, listened to any subsequent ones, all at once, would I feel like it felt redundant because they were covering the same stuff? Maybe.
Right.
But because I listened to each one the day it came out and it was only an hour. So I do wonder, I don't know the backstory of how this film got made, whether the Ezra Edelman was already hooked up with ESPN beforehand and knew that it would be shown on TV in these chunks and that there would just be this weird one-off where it would be shown in theaters a few times for awards purposes. But if your intention is to show it on TV and give people bites, I think there's more latitude for a little redundancy because it's reminding people, you haven't seen it for a week. You need to be reminded a little bit of the emotion.
I think the difference is that I'd never felt that this was intended to be given in chunks like that.
You thought it was intended as a 7-hour movie.
I think it was. Well, the reason and the reason I say that is there was never that moment which you get in The Jinx or The Staircase or Serial or whatever, where it's like, everything changes and you're like, oh my God, you know.
In The Jinx there was.
Yeah, everything, you know, The Jinx there was. And I'm saying in this, there was never that. This felt like it was never a case of like giving a piece of information, then we're going to turn off and we're just going to give you little teasers to make sure you tune in next week. I felt what they were doing this entire film was building layer upon layer upon layer to make an argument.
But they also did it so modularly that I don't think that they actually, maybe even while they were making it, even knew how it would be released or how it would be digested. Because literally after maybe between like 15 and 30 minutes, it would cut to black and give you a title or a quote. And I'm just saying, like, they could have been planning half-hour episodes. They could now this is the other thing too. Do I think the 3 time period way that they decided to release this thing works well? Yeah. Again, I broken record. Even though I do think it's too long, I think that works very well. I think that was a smart thing to do with the entire, if this was going to be a thing. If they intended, and I don't believe they did, to just, in my opinion, based on what I saw, I'm gleaning it off of the thing I was presented. If they meant to show it as a 7 hour and 47 minute piece, I think that is that makes it. And there's I was going to say failure. In no way is this film a failure at all. Film asterisk, but it makes it a weaker film asterisk than it would have been had it been like a 4 hour and some change documentary.
I think the difference is that you found it tedious, right?
Parts of it, yeah.
Yeah, you found it tedious. And that's a totally fine reaction to it. You know, like people read Moby Dick and find it tedious. I find Moby Dick tedious in places, you know, because I'm not entirely engaged with it. But I read Stephen King's It, which is 1,000 pages, and I'm like invested in every page of it.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
And so that's because it probably was longer and they cut it down to a point that made it the best story possible.
No. What I don't want to do is get into a conversation about why it is different to Moby.
I'm saying at one point, every piece of thing that we loved was longer than it was. And somebody, depending on who it was or what place it was, decided what the most important things were and released that chunk of it. And that's our thing we love or whatever.
I think the point that I wanted to make there was that for me, I was completely engaged for 7.5 hours. I could have gone longer on this film.
And that's fine. But I'm saying I wasn't.
You did. You did 14.
You did.
I did it twice.
Yeah.
And I watched the OJ, the FX show in between that as well.
Yeah.
You did it twice because you fell asleep. Be honest. You fell asleep a couple times while you watched this.
Matt, you've known me for a couple years now. Do you honestly think I fell asleep or would I have watched this if I wasn't into it?
Oh, no, not at all. I think you love it. There's no question. I'm just saying you probably fell asleep for a little bit. You had to restart it a couple times.
I'm right in between the two of you. I think it was phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm so glad I saw it. And I thought there was so much juicy stuff in it, but I think it could have been edited a little bit.
True. And another thing, and this is not the film's fault. This is society's or my friend circle's fault. Everyone who I mentioned that I was seeing it or that you wanted to do it was like, oh my God, it's the most amazing thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then when I saw it, I didn't see the most amazing thing. I saw a good documentary that I thought was too long. And again, that's all. Everything we do is not in a vacuum. I understand that. But at the end of the day, I would stand by, even if I did. I would like to think that if I saw this in a vacuum and no one gave me their opinions, I would still think it's too long.
And that's it.
I think there's also OJ fatigue.
Right.
Like, I think if I had watched this in a vacuum and hadn't seen the FX show, which I very much enjoyed, and there have been all these other things recently about OJ, I think I might have enjoyed it even more. But there is I'm a little OJ fatigue. Because it isn't just the 7.5 hours. It's like, what am I going on now? In the last 6 months, I've watched like 20 hours of OJ. And this gets to the thing that I think is really, you know, it's the question of made in America. Mm-hmm. What is the fascination with it? Why are we compelled to discuss OJ? Why are we drawn to the OJ phenomenon? You know, because this is a person, and I wasn't privy to OJ the athlete. I wasn't privy to
I have a simple answer for this.
OJ the movie star. I wasn't, you know, like all I saw of him was Naked Gun and then the Bronco and the trial. But why are we so interested in not just in OJ, but in murder in general?
We are obsessed as a culture with the judgment of our idols. Meaning, And now this whole thing was about judging an idol, whether or not he did it. Everyone had an opinion, blah, blah, blah. And we, the little people, finally get to judge this person who we, as little people, have elevated. It's this whole thing. Everyone loves to see a hero fall. Mm-hmm. And it comes from, I feel like, if we're kind of break it down sort of psychologically, is it's this weird sort of like selfish nature of like, well, I'm not this good, so I kind of want to take this person down a notch, whether or not they are guilty or innocent of what they did. It's this thing where now it's my turn to judge my better. And America, and that's the only society I've lived in. That's the only one I can speak to. Loves it. That we love building people up, actors, politicians, all this stuff, just because no one is perfect. So there, sometimes it's murder that they should be put away for life for. Other times it's a sex tape, or other times it's even to the point, I mean, before all the Trumpism, even if you just said an off-color mark, that could be the end of your career, because we love building them up so we can tear them down, because it's the only thing that little people, at quotes, as a large group, have the ability to do. And especially, oh my God, could you imagine if this happened, if the OJ trial happened, if the internet was super prevalent? Like,
that would be crazy.
Holy shit. We turn every fucking little thing on the internet into something like, this could be the next OJ trial. Like, it's treated that way.
You know what I think would be interesting if the internet was around and the OJ trial happened? Is I think we'd forget about OJ much quicker.
Yes.
Because I think the internet,
because this was the first internet equivalent of a story like this, because it was everywhere.
I don't know.
But
so
yeah,
here's my thinking about why it's stood the test of time as a story.
Right.
So the most fundamental tenet of society is we don't kill people.
Right.
If people were allowed to kill people, you couldn't live your life. Right. It is literally the most fundamental thing. And this is a story in which that's brought into question. Right. A group of people seems to have decided that another value was more important than whether people are allowed to live or not.
It's interesting because I that's the one thing that I think should be like the reason why we're interested in this story, but I actually don't think that is the reason why we're interested in the story.
Yeah, it may not be. Because he's good looking and everybody's gorgeous and the whole thing.
No, it's a line that Marcia Clark says in her summation, I think, which is she brings up a comic strip that was written in the LA Times, and she says, a little girl is talking to her daughter watching, a little girl is talking to a mom who's watching TV, and says, what's the N-word that they can't keep mentioning in this trial? And she says, it's Nicole. And I agree with you.
Side note, we haven't said Nicole's name once in this entire thing until right now. Just point that out.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think
the victims, the real victims.
Like the question should be about like us making a decision about why life matters. But I don't think that's why we're interested in the OJ case. Because as we've just kind of established, we don't really talk about Nicole. We don't talk about the victims that much. We talk about the circus around them, and we talk about the fact that they were the fulcrum to which this entire conversation about race, about justice, about celebrity, about fame, about money all kind of hinges upon, but we're not actually that interested in them. Like, few people would know Nicole's, that was more shocking about the documentary is when you saw, like you said yourself, you saw the brutality of the actual murder. It was
horrible. But no, I think that's right, because it's more about the concept of there is the shit that was going on in LA then made a group of people believe that it was okay to let somebody do the worst thing anybody can ever do to make a point.
Right.
That's and so so say you're a lawyer, you're instead of a filmmaker, you're telling the story. You first have to lay the foundation that he did it. So they did that. They showed unequivocally, in my opinion, that he did it.
Sure.
And then they show how it all played out and the reasons he wasn't convicted.
Right.
I mean, it's fascinating.
Do you though, and do either of you sort of have that conversation with, he definitely did it, and it's so strange that he was acquitted, in the same breath as the 4 policemen who were accused of beating Rodney King were acquitted for not doing anything wrong? Do you know what I mean? Like
Wait, what's the question? I'm sorry.
The question is that we're talking about how it's crazy that O.J. Simpson was acquitted, right? Mm-hmm. do we still also...
It's crazy that those guys were acquitted.
Of course.
It's crazy that those guys were acquitted.
Right. So why aren't we doing documentaries about that?
Yeah. No, why...
They are.
I'm just saying the point of this documentary is to draw a line between those two things and say, yeah, everyone does think it's crazy that OJ was acquitted, but are we really surprised given that here's a line between a previous case where 4 policemen beat a man on camera, like mercilessly, and were acquitted for it. Are we really surprised that the legal system would allow a person to be acquitted?
I think that's an interesting question. I don't think the film poses that. I think no, because it brings up the Rodney King, the whole thing in the first bit, and then it maybe mentions it super briefly, sort of in summation.
Oh, they bring up that Rodney King thing over and over.
I think they bring it up as something that was in the back,
in the air.
They flash to it. But what I'm saying is during the trial.
No, I get what you're saying to this, but I don't think the film's intention is to be like, are we surprised that OJ got off because these guys got off? I don't think it's saying that at all. I think they're using that as the cultural touch point as to why a group of people, even in the trial, outside the trial, etc., thought, as you said, more like now something trumps murder as more important societally. I don't think the film was just trying to make a correlation like, are we surprised that the whole legal system's broken? Like, I
kind of think it was.
Okay, I didn't get that.
They even at the point at which OJ is acquitted, that's the point that they bring back time and time again. They show people like
they cheering. Show that because they want to show why people are cheering. They're not saying that about the trial and are we surprised A happened because B also happened. That's not the same thing. So I'm saying it's trying to contextualize why everyone was getting behind OJ. I believe truly, and again, I'm so out of place in this and like whatever, it's because people of color had been just shit on in the legal system forever. And here's a prominent guy who actually didn't identify in his own words as being black.
Which is the irony of the case.
Of course. Because it suits his case, he becomes this sort of thing, even changing the pictures in his house. Like, so it's to show why those people are getting behind a man like this. And to your point was why that like this tenant is now more important than murder.
I guess my point here is that we all are in agreement. It's crazy that he was acquitted.
Yes.
Are we all in agreement that it's crazy? It's equally crazy that the 4 police officers behind the beating of Rodney King were acquitted.
Yes, but this film does not make that I can't think of the word, that comparison. It brings it up for different contextual reasons and necessary for the strength of the film, but it does not make that comparison. It absolutely does not. It sets up why people were for or against things accordingly. But it is never saying that it never jumps back as like, hey, society, it's so crazy this happened for this guy, and it's also so crazy this happened for these guys. It doesn't do that. It literally uses that as a societal just sort of temperature gauge sort of for how things are being witnessed. And again, I think it does it well. I just didn't get this comparison that you're making.
What I'm saying is that is the pendulum of the justice system that I'm seeing in this film, that it's basically saying the justice system isn't objective. It is entirely a spectrum from which we
sure.
And the point that it's making is the spectrum that they're focusing in on is the Rodney King beating and O.J. Simpson. And they draw a line that, to me, this film draws a direct line between those two events.
There is correlation, but it's not, the verdicts themselves are not these connect. It's not painted in the film as these two. I'm talking about letting the fact of letting O.J. Simpson off and letting these police officers off.
Did you hear the juror say the reason, and the Black Panther juror who stands up in the middle at the end of the trial and raises his fist as a Black Power movement?
Yeah.
And the juror is saying, well, we just wanted to have one of our own get away with it.
Right. And that's, listen, that's 100% true, but that's not the point you're saying. You're saying that this film is making a direct comparison based on about the legal system, and it's treating the OJ verdict to the Rodney King verdict, as in letting both of these people off and just stating that the point is, oh, it's broken all over the place. That's not what they're doing. The Rodney King stuff in this film, and please be the tiebreaker in this because we do have to wrap this up, is to set the cultural tone of why. It is not meant to be an allegoric sort of thing between the two things, at least presented in the way the film does.
Do you think that the jurors that voted to acquit O.J. Simpson weren't thinking about
Of course they were, but
he's saying there is causation. It did motivate them in what made their minds up.
Yeah.
But they weren't going, is this apples to apples? Is a woman getting murdered in her driveway the same as a...
And the film wasn't doing that.
I look at it slightly differently in that I think that the Rodney King case is used as sort of the lightning rod that exemplifies what the Black experience in LA was at that time and total gross injustice.
Right.
And so that it like shows you, look, this is what's in their minds as they're going into this room to decide if they're going to punish this guy for something he clearly did that's horrible.
But you don't. I'm confused as to what your point is here.
She just made my point exactly. She's literally just, Melissa, you just 100% said what I was trying to say. I couldn't have said it clearer.
How is that different from what I'm saying, which is that the film draws a line between these two things?
Okay, I see. So he's saying line between them, meaning a connection between them.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
You were comparing them apples to apples, and the film was
saying... As in the film was saying, look at both of these things. Isn't the justice system so fucked up?
I think the film is saying that.
No, but not.
You're putting them on a linear progression.
Equal in the film's eye of importance.
No, of course, like a murder is not the same. Rodney King lived, but
no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about don't even talk about the severity of the crimes. What I was taking from you and why I was being so argumentative was
because you're a dick?
You were setting no, not at all, because I'm trying to tell you what the fuck I'm thinking. Is that the way you were talking about it? At least the words that were used got me thinking that you thought this film, in the eye of the film's importance, was saying that letting O.J. Simpson off and letting those 4 officers off was equal in the film's eye of importance, or what this was about. Whereas what you said...
that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, there we go. That's all I was looking for.
I'm saying,
everyone gets along.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the film draws a line between the madness of
it connects it, of course. It's contextualized. It's the lightning rod. She said it perfectly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So we were getting into a semantic argument as we normally do. I'd also like to point out to our lovely guest and all of the listeners that Shahir resorted to name calling first. So... whatever, we're cordial. Shahir, this was your baby, this episode, and we are going at about we're almost closing it on an hour and a half. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before the end?
We're not talking for 7.5 hours because I booked this entire night.
Oh, no, we are not, because I understand the importance of editing.
Haven't you been on a 7-hour panel?
A 10-hour panel, but people that could leave got to leave.
Just fair point. Our Star Wars episodes are longer than this.
They're also episodic, and you should never listen to them all in a row.
No, one Star Wars episode is longer than this.
No, I understand that. I'm saying 7 hours.
You see what we're doing here?
I do.
7 hours.
I think this is a masterclass in filmmaking, and what's amazing to me about it is, like, for example, a film like or a series like The Jinx is incredibly stylized, incredibly polished, an incredible achievement in visual storytelling, and this is not that. This to me is akin to a novel on film, and what I love about that is that it is a film that is not afraid of detail, of nuance, of richness and complexity, and of painting, of giving us a really complex idea. And it takes 7.5 hours to do it, but I fully digested it, and I think it was a rich tapestry of storytelling, and I love that about it. I adore that about it. I think it should be shown in classes. I think
I think it will be.
Yeah, I think it will be too.
And so
probably across multiple classes.
Well,
just gonna put that out there.
Extra credit
classes. Yeah. So I think it does without having to actually spell things out, it starts asking very big, hitty questions about the things that we're interested in as a society and the reason why we spend our time talking about things as we talk about movies. And so for all those reasons, it is without a doubt. I mean, if I'd seen it last year, it would have probably been my number 2 film of the year.
Asterisk.
Behind Moonlight. So it's absolutely wonderful. I've seen it twice now without sleeping. I will watch it again, I'm sure, at some point.
You watched it twice back to back without sleeping?
This is why we have difficulties in semantics with Matt. He's a literal guy.
I'm a very literal man.
Yeah, you are.
So I think it's absolutely wonderful.
It's also oddly timely. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah,
but it feels very relevant. It doesn't feel like you're watching something that happened
20 years ago.
Doesn't have any relevance to us.
Melissa, Matt. To let Melissa.
I'm going to let you go real quick. It's just, I agree with everything you said other than the length thing. I think I've made that very clear if we're doing sort of like a final thoughtsy type thing right now.
You're more of a girth guy, not a length guy.
I'm more of an all around the exact right size kind of guy. And this for me was not. I do think it was all the things you mentioned. It was just too long. I do feel like the editor in me was just like, okay, this could have been shorter. And that's preference, and I totally get that. But I think it's 100% worth. I think classes will be taught with it. I think it's a touch point not only in sort of it's a touch point in every aspect of American society. I think the title is one of the best things about this thing. It's just made in America. This could not happen anywhere else the way it happened here. And yeah, so 100%. I look, and I know I feel like I've been shitting on the time as much. If you have the time, yeah, watch it. Of course you should watch it. It's brilliant and wonderful and one of the strongest documentaries I've seen in a long time. But for me, just think it could have been cut down an hour or two.
Yeah.
And I get
the last.
Bring us home, Melissa. Of course.
I don't disagree that maybe some little bits could be cut. I wouldn't necessarily cut out hours of it. But there's so much said. It's said in a non-preachy way, which is it's saying it's open-ended sounds not true.
Right.
But it's not telling you what to feel about this stuff. So I thought it was really phenomenal filmmaking. Yeah, I'm glad you made me watch it.
I mean, as a writer, would you to me, the thing that I love about it, and this will be we can wrap this up, but as a writer, do you think there are lessons from this you could pull for your future work?
That is a great question. I mean, it's funny because narrative film is so, at least what I do is so structured, and I'm very focused on tight storytelling.
Right.
And not boring people.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily always about education, although occasionally I throw that in there.
Yeah.
Edutainment.
Like the whole eugenics, you know,
of course.
Ball of giggles.
Yeah.
That I'll come into a theater near you. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a different art.
Yeah.
I totally respect it. I don't know that I could do it, but it doesn't inform my filmmaking in an on the nose way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Good question though.
But we should have you back at some point.
Oh yeah, let's do a narrative film.
Yeah, once you're
totally.
50 Shades of Grey. We're gonna 50 Shades Darker. We're doing it.
Yeah. A, we should do a narrative film, but B, we should also have you back to talk about your films.
Oh, of course.
Once they're out.
Yes.
Sure. I can't wait.
Nice. Well, guys, this has been the only podcast about OJ made in America. Melissa, when you are not saying points that I believe in my heart far better than I can actually say them, where can folks find you and your work?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, hopefully they'll find my work in movie theaters.
But until then.
And on TV. I mean, I'm on Twitter like that.
What's your Twitter handle?
Okay, so oh my God, what is mine?
Is it
dun dun dun
or M Hilfers? Hold on,
it could be any of those things.
I think it's at Melissa Hilfers.
It would be terrible if it was Milfers.
I know.
Wow.
You really should trademark that.
He's not the first person to have told me that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's getting a little inappropriate in here.
And I'm surprised. You can tell he respects you greatly because that's the first joke like that he's made in an hour and a half.
It was so hard. He was holding it in.
I was really like,
but all that rage and enthusiasm about the OJ movie, now that he's got that out, we all agree it was good.
Do you feel like you just kind of, you're like,
I've been holding in that Milfers joke for a while.
I meant OJ in general, but yeah.
I'm going to watch this again.
You're a psychopath.
So if you want to find me, you can find me watching the OJ documentary.
But before that.
I think it's at Melissa Hilfers. I think it's at Melissa Hilfers.
It's not Hilfers. It's at Melissa Hilfers.
That's me, right? How do you know? I go to a picture of me.
You go to, there you go.
At Melissa Hilfers.
There you go.
MELISSAHILFERS.
You got these
website?
2 movies coming out. You've got a website.
I have a bunch of stuff coming out. Yeah. You'll hear about it. It's going to be in the trades and papers and stuff. So.
Yeah.
It's already in the trades. We're already hearing about it.
Well, because I sent you a link.
No, I knew. Look, I'm on the what's her name? Dakota
Pipeline?
I was like Dakota Fanning. I was about.
Well, that's interesting because I'll tell you offline. There was interest.
Oh, sure. I'm on the Dakota Johnson's fanzine page, and I saw the notes.
She has many pages. Yes, no, but thank you guys. It was really fun.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming. Shahir?
You can find me at shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD.com. On Twitter at shahirdaud. At shahirdaud. Links to everything is on the website. You can just go there and find it. Even I don't know why you'd want to.
Wait, stop. You say that. You say that 30% of the time because you have good work and you're an interesting human being. That's why people should go to your shit.
I don't know. I doubt people listen.
He is the worst. He is the worst at self sort of like publication.
You should have learned something from OJ.
Yeah, 100%.
Who wants to see this?
Or this. If you guys want to follow me in any of my life and works, which they are totally worth your time, money, and or effort, you can catch all my stuff at MatthewKroll.com, MatthewKroll.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Skeletor, the number 4 PREZ, and then on Twitter at EmperorMSK. A lot of good stuff on there. If you want to catch all of our stuff for the only podcast about movies, the best place is to find all of our things is either on SoundCloud or iTunes. I kind of prefer iTunes because you can give us stars and rate us if you like what's going on. Please do that. Also, check out our website, onlymoviepodcast.com. That's the prettiest way you can experience our content. It's a very nice Squarespace template. And
brought to you by Squarespace?
Brought to you by Squarespace, who is not paying us.
In fact, we're paying them.
We are. Oh, man. Melissa, thank you so much once again for coming on. We have to have you back. And real quick, let's just end on the final, if he's guilty or innocent. We'll go around the room. I'll point. See you next week.
Guilty.
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 Well, there we go.
This is why we're afraid of Americans.
That was a hard one.
Yeah.